So warrior, we also have John Mark Ndeto, who is the founder of Beard Fest Movement. He'll be telling us a bit more about it. And last but not least, Dr. Andrew Odhiambo, who is a medical oncologist. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion. It is Movember. And many people wondering, okay, what is that about? Many would probably associate it with the beards or the mustaches that they see men growing around this time of year. And it's all to raise awareness, as we've learned over the years, especially when it comes to prostate cancer. Let me begin with you, Dr. Odhiambo, just in terms of the more prevalent cancers that we see in men here in Kenya, and at least the ones who come to see you, for consultation.
We have cancer of the colon and cancer of the stomach. Those are the top 4 cancers that affect men in Kenya. Okay,
and Richard, you have gone through this process. You actually were diagnosed with stomach cancer. Just take us through briefly, what were some of the warning signs, for any man who could be watching this broadcast and wondering, what should I be looking out for?
Stomach cancer really has no symptoms. But I used to have a lot of flatulence, just gas all the time. And I would go to see a doctor in a clinic nearby, get medication, everything goes down. Then a couple of weeks later, it's back again. So we kind of decided, look, let's get this checked by a specialist. So I went to see a gastroenterologist and did, the whole thing. And that's how. So there was really nothing specific that led to me to think that I had, that I had stomach cancer. It was just that we decided, look, let's get this thing sorted out instead of keeping on going to the clinic every now and then. Let's just go there. Let's go and get checked, kind of, yeah. And I'd not been checked for a while, so maybe that's one other thing which needs to be a conversation also, regular checks.
And that's generally the case for a lot of men. They just don't go for health checkups. Speak more to that and just the importance of, even if nothing seems wrong, to keep up that routine.
I was diagnosed with stage 1B, which made it fairly easy to manage. You can imagine if it's gone all the way to stage 4, which normally means that, it's everywhere in the body. So if everybody does checks every now and then, but the only problem, I think one of the problems we have is maybe, there's something called self-medication. When you have a headache, you go and take some painkiller or something like that, or when your leg is paining, So I think my luck was the fact that I did a checkup. If it was just the usual, what men do, then, it would have been a different story altogether.
Absolutely. John Mark, let me come to you, in terms of what necessitated the Beard Fest movement.
We're a group of guys. We're about 15 of us who founded the movement. We had our first event in 2016 where we partnered with Zambezi Hospital, and we're giving guys free checkups in terms of, because you see that the notion people have with cancer that affect men is mostly prostate. And before the prostate checks, the doctor can confirm or beat invasive. But now we have the PSA, the blood test. So guys, we're trying to show guys let's make it a norm to go and get tested.
Dr. Odhiambo, John Mark mentioned when it comes to specifically prostate cancer, some men may not be as open because they feel it's very invasive. Of course, there's the alternative of the blood test through the PSA, but what more can be done to help men kind of be more comfortable with screenings like that?
Thanks, Vicky. So for prostate cancer screening, it's a bit individualized because we want men to be knowledgeable about the test. The PSA test has its pros and cons because you need to understand what will happen if you get an abnormal test. So what we encourage men is, when it comes time for screening, please visit your local doctor or any doctor that is nearby you. Have a chat with the doctor about the blood test, understand the pros and cons of the blood test, and then you can have your sample drawn. It's important to remember that not all abnormal PSA tests point towards cancer. And the fact that you have a normal PSA test does not mean that you do not have cancer. So you cannot be screening yourself alone in isolation. You have to do this in consultation with your doctor, because further tests will follow once you get an abnormal PSA blood test. Now, for the finger test, which people think is invasive, it's not always a must we have to do the finger test. We only do it when it is indicated or when you have an abnormal blood PSA test. But it is not the only form for screening for prostate cancer. So just to remind men that if you are interested in screening, or if you qualify, if you're in the age bracket, if you're over 40, if you have a family history of prostate cancer, then present yourself to the doctor and express interest that you would like to be screened, and don't stay at home until you get very severe symptoms before you come for early diagnosis.
And just as a follow-up, Dr. Odhiambo, you mentioned there's an age bracket within which men, should get screened 40 plus, but have you seen cases where younger men are presenting with symptoms?
It is extremely rare. About less than 0.5% of all cases of prostate cancer will be below the age of 40. Majority across the world will actually be over the age of 60, and it is even older in the northern countries. But in the populations that we've studied locally, the mean age is about 65 to 68 years of age. So it's fairly a disease of the older men, but it does not mean that we do not see men in their early 50s or in their late 40s with prostate cancer. We do see them, but it is extremely rare.
Richard, let me bring you in. Let's talk about lifestyle. Generally, you'll find most Kenyan men, when they want to socialize, they go for nyama choma, probably a drink or two. And that sometimes can have a negative impact if you do it enough on your health. How can we start to kind of inculcate healthier socializing behavior, if you will? And I know for you, in your case, you had actually stopped drinking prior to your diagnosis. And what kind of impact did that have on you personally?
I think a lot of what happens is peer pressure, basically, because you want to belong. When I meet John or Dr. Odhiambo, we probably want to have a drink and that kind of thing. But for me, the reason why I stopped was, first of all, because I was diagnosed pre-diabetes anyway, and was on borderline hypertension. So the doctor told me, you have the choice. The last 5-6 years have been the worst in my life. They've kind of erased every good thing I had in the last 50 years or so. So I think what we need to do, and John can come in also in their campaign, that if you come down with one of these lifestyle diseases, your life is completely changed, that you never really enjoy life again, that, it's pain, it's medication, it's, lots of things. So if we can have that conversation, that, okay, you do your thing, but with moderation, but at the same time, also make sure that every year you do a checkup. I had an insurance policy of 5 million shillings. And then when I went to the hospital and the bill was 1.5 million, the insurance said for things like cancer and whatnot, they only paid 10% of the value. So, they only paid $500,000. And then I was just beginning the treatment. So all those kind of things are kind of, it's stacked. I mean, life is, the facilities are stacked against such diseases.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned, the cost, not just in terms of physical pain to someone's body, but also the financial. And you don't get as much support from insurance companies, unfortunately, and I've heard it from several other cancer patients going through the same. But John Mark, let me bring you in terms of engaging a younger demographic of men. It's assumed that there's this sense of invincibility among them. You're still young, you're still strong, you're still able to do several things. At that age, you're probably more concerned about your car than your health. And then if you're thinking about health, it's probably just the gym. It starts and stops there. How do you start to have a conversation with younger men about kind of having a more holistic view towards their health?
That's actually, we were just having a debate a while back with a friends of mine about about the gene. So some guy, we had a friend of ours who died, I think 3 weeks ago, and he was very fit, but he committed suicide. So the holistic approach, I think, is also mental health. So now what we're doing is, for men, getting a man to do something out of his routine is one of the hardest things. Getting a guy to wake up and go change his diet, go see the doctor, those are the hardest things. So we're trying to look for more fun ways of how to do it. So we have car meetups where we get a few friends, because a while back I saw research where in every 1,000 Kenyans, there's a doctor. So all of us know a doctor somewhere. And now I know Dr. Gambo, so I'm just adding him to my list. So now we're including doctors on this, every event we do. You see, like, we're not just talking about alcohol, meat, because we do consume a lot of that, especially the younger generation. But when we include a doctor there and you slide this into the conversation. So basically it's just creating awareness. We're trying to create awareness, and also on the younger generation, we're trying to show them, you can have fun without alcohol. You can have fun, because I know you just talked about cars, but I think it's a good passion, because someone who's dedicated to his car will spend more time on his car and less on other consumption of anything illegal or any substance.
John Mark, you mentioned the issue of mental health. It's often the unseen part of the whole person. Though you're a medical oncologist, how important is it that men start to look at that aspect of their lives of mental health? Many internalize the stress that they go through. There are hardly ever any outlets in which they can release that tension and stress. But what would you recommend, in terms of dealing and tackling the issue of mental health among men?
Thanks, Victoria. So mental health is a really big issue, especially amongst young men. As has been mentioned before, the suicide rates are increasing, and a lot of mental health issues in the 21st century have a lot to do with social media, with trying to keep up, issues to do with workspace, issues to do with alcohol consumption, substance abuse. So there's a whole myriad of issues that surround mental health surrounding men. And it's true that really many of the men don't have an outlet to distress or to decongest. But really, it all starts with talking. And I think the movement that has been formed is a very good platform for men to come together and to talk, because talking helps and opening up helps. There are a lot of social platforms that allow you to talk anonymously and release your stress and release your inner feelings. And I think talking is really a very big contributor to trying to relieve stress. So we encourage all the men out there, if you are dealing with anything internally, do not be ashamed. Speak out, speak to your siblings, speak to your workmates, speak to your relatives, speak to your friends, because talking and beginning the conversation is the first step towards getting a holistic approach to healing the mind.
Richard, I just want to kind of get all your closing thoughts as we wrap up. In terms of the way forward to ensure that men really do take this seriously and don't wait until it gets too late, when you start to feel that pain or the stress is just insurmountable. In your view, what's the way forward? How do we reach men effectively? I know you have taken initiative, and you also reach out on social media to men via videos and other tools. But what's the way forward in really reaching them effectively?
I don't know if you know that I lost my son to suicide some 3 years ago. He was a pilot, and whatever happened, we just found him hanging in his home. But so I also got into that space of mental health. But the idea is we just need to encourage people to open up and in a non-judgmental kind of a way. But the idea is to reach them that I am not going to judge you. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to give you my thoughts, about it. And then, kind of. So it's a conversation that we need to have.
Were there any signs, and I'm so sorry to hear about your son, were there any signs to kind of point to something going wrong in his case?
There never was. He was the happiest. In fact, he was the happiest guy in the family. I've got a family of 4, 2 boys and 2 girls. He was the happiest of the lot. He was the one who was friendliest. He was, he was the guy who, he was the life of a party, And that particular day, we were just sitting in the sitting room, I'd come in from the office in the afternoon. He said he's going to take a rest, and then he never came out again. So, there were nothing. Let's just put it that way. And he was very happy. He had just been given a flight he'd always wanted to try. So, he was going to do it the following day. He committed suicide on a Thursday. He was going to do the flight on Friday. But we don't know. And he didn't leave any note. He didn't, there was nothing. And the only thing we saw when the police came and took his phone and opened it, all we had was him with his happy guy, just generally just having a good time. There was never any issue. But it would appear that there must have been something which really, he never got it out. Again, that issue of, you are the man, you can't be a crybaby. That is a very wrong attitude that we have. You've
said it, and that can save a life, actually speaking and releasing whatever it is they're holding on to. Thank you again for being so candid about that, Richard. And one last one here, because I've seen people talk about this at times, saying, what if we had a designated health facility for men, a men's clinic, if you will? Because, we do have some designated for women, children. Would that help at all?
I think it would be not a bad idea, because a lot of health issues have been centered around women, childbirth, Nairobi Women's Hospital, Women's Clinic. I know some countries have designated men's clinics, and maybe that could be a good point to attract the men to go and have their checkups. So I don't think it's a bad idea overall.
All right. Perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much, Dr. Odhiambo, John Mark, Richard. And that's a challenge, I guess, to the medical fraternity or any health advocates to start that men's clinic. You never know what change it could make in changing perceptions that men have towards their health. Thank you so much for your time. Keep the conversation going on social media. The hashtag is Citizen Weekend. Thank you once again for watching.